Dobar dan, da li me čujete? Ništa, pričat ću na taj, ovdje ću
Evo nas ponovim još.
Sorry for this late coming. We had late previous session, but we'll start in a minute. So I hope that I see Sander, I see Mikkel, I see
Octal,
Janja.
there's an echo. Okay.
Ovo je PDF.
And
Samo PDF i Ctrl L i idem na full screen.
Dobro, ok.
to jeste postavili. Da, nek se postavi ovdje da mogu ljudi dozivati. Pa neka ovdje može da radi. Evo, dobar dan. Nadam se da smo online.
Bogdane, imam jedno pitanje.
Izvolite.
Zanima me što se tiče ovih kratkih prezentacija koje smo pripremili.
Halo.
Hoćete li vi njih šerati ili ću sama to raditi?
Mi smo ih samo dobili da bi prevodioci mogli da se pripreme za...
Može. Ok, samo sam htjela to provjeriti.
I vi ćete govoriti na hrvatskom, naravno, pošto smo se tako dogovorili, a ostale sesije je na engleskom jeziku.
Da, ok.
U redu, prijatno.
Ok, da možemo govoriti.
Može. Ja koliko vidim jeste.
Dobar dan svima, kratka informacija, sesija je na engleskom jeziku, ukoliko vam je potrebno, će najveći mjeri biti na engleskom jeziku, ukoliko je bilo kome iz auditorijuma potreban prevod, možete uzeti slušalice za mobilne telefone i koristiti preko Zooma opciju interpretation da biste slušali prevod sa engleskog na srpski jezik. Znači, vodit ćemo i diskusiju sa prisutnim kolegom Hercogom također na engleskom, kao i sa većinom panelista koji su danas ovdje sa nama. Ja jedino ne vidim da li koleginica Aleksandra Rašić se ipak uključila, ali evo, nadam se da je to. Znači, ovdje slobodno se poslužite ili od volontera sa ovim slušalicama. So, hello everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the second panel session of the 18th Serbian Library Association Conference. We're going to speak today about e-books, publishers and libraries, opportunities, problems and solutions. We are going to have at least 4 panelists. I'm going to name them. Of course, we're having Janja Maras from Zagreb City Libraries, Marko Hercog, Chief Technology Officer from Beletrina and Biblos.se, Mikkel Christoffersen, Chief Consultant at Copenhagen Libraries, Chief Negotiator for eReolen.dk, and Sander van Kempen, Senior Advisor, National Library of the Netherlands, Online Bibliotheek.nl. So, in essence, we wanted to start a strong discussion about opportunities with e-books and e-book lending in libraries, particularly here in Serbia. And that is why we're having 4 panelists so far from 4 European countries, which are more or less comparable. And I hope that we're going to speak about some issues with e-books, with e-book lending in libraries, and also about the future possibilities of introducing such services in libraries here in Serbia, of course. COVID-19 pandemic just introduced this issue, as probably we all can agree, users are demanding such services. So I hope that this is going to be a fruitful discussion. And once more, sorry for this late coming. I would like to give floor to our first panelists, Janja Maras from Zagreb City Libraries. with her short presentation of Zaki Book application, which was developed by the Zagreb City Libraries regarding their e-lending services. So, Janja, I hope you're with us.
Dobar dan, želim pozdraviti sve okupljene u Kragujevcu, a i one koji nas prate online. Ja ću ukratko reći kako su knjižnice grada Zagreba uvele posudbu e-knjige kroz jednu kratku prezentaciju. Evo ovako, meni sada pokazuje da ja ne mogu sama šerat prezentaciju, pa sad ne znam, hoćete li vi to učiniti umjesto mene ili ćemo ovako da ja ukratko samo kažem?
Mislim da će host da vam to sad omogući. Da li sad možete?
Samo trenutak. Mogu. Pa evo, knjižnice grada Zagreba su uvele uslugu posudbe e-knjige 2019. godine i to nam se uoči ove pandemijske godine u stvari učinilo kao jedan proročanski potez, osobito kada smo doživjeli globalni lockdown. Posudbu e-knjige smo odlučili razviti kroz aplikaciju Zaki Book. I ono što je zanimljivo, ta aplikacija je u stvari direktno vezana uz knjižnični program Zaki koji služi za poslovanje. Konkretno u Hrvatskoj čak njih 400 različitih knjižnica koristi tu vrstu usluge. I knjižnice grada Zagreba taj su sustav razvile zajedno sa svojom informatičkim partnerom Vivom Info. Znači cjelokupno poslovanje kupovine, nabave, obrade, a na kraju i posudbe vezano je i provodi se kroz knjižnični sustav i obavljaju se svi knjižničarski poslovi i on je osmišljen kroz 3 aplikacije. Jedna je aplikacija ZPUB koji koriste nakladnici i nakladnici sve svoje e-naslove unose kroz tu aplikaciju, zatim čim je nakladnik unese kroz ZPUB, ona postaje vidljiva knjižničarima koji rade u knjižničarskom sustavu Zaki kroz njihovu aplikaciju Zaki Reader. Znači Zaki Reader je u stvari aplikacija za pregledavanje oglednih primjeraka neke e-knjige. I na kraju, nakon što se odradi cijela obrada e-knjige, ona postaje vidljiva i u našem katalogu, odnosno postaje vidljiva kroz aplikaciju Zaki Book, znači koja je namijenjena korisnicima i riječ je u stvari o prvoj hrvatskoj knjižničnoj aplikaciji koja omogućuje posudbu e-knjige. Kao što sam rekla, s obzirom da je to vezano uz knjižnični program, ta posudba e-knjige, odnosno korištenje takve vrste usluge automatski bilo dostupno i svim ostalim knjižnicama koje koriste taj program i do sada je čak 31 knjižnica, zahvaljujući ovoj aplikaciji, omogućena je bila posudba e-knjige kroz aplikaciju Zaki Book, odnosno 31 knjižnica koristi tu vrstu usluge. Mi smo sa nakladnicima se dogovorili da će se znači nabava te e-knjiga vršiti posredstvom agregatora, to je ovaj naš informatički partner Viva Info i to je uobičajena praksa u svijetu. I dogovoreno je da se primjenjuje model kupovanja 52 licence koje se mogu koristiti na neograničeno vrijeme. Što znači 52 licence? To znači da mi dokle god se posude te 52 licence, odnosno primjerka, nisu ograničene na nikakvo vremensko vrijeme, tipa na godinu ili 2, nego dokle god se one ne iskoriste. Nakon, naravno, iskorištavanja te licence, takve e-knjige odlaze u otpis i knjižnice grada Zagreba moraju ići u dokup licence. Što se tiče same posudbe, kod nas je isto tako omogućeno da svih 52 licence su dostupne u isto vrijeme. Znači, ukoliko neki popularni naslov u isto vrijeme mogu posuditi 52 osobe. Posudba se u drugoj godini korištenja, znači kao što sam rekla u 2020. gotovo udvostručila, a udvostručio se i broj članova koji su koristili tu uslugu i takav trend se u stvari zadržao i u 2021. godini, što znači da moram priznati da vjerovatno dio zasluga leži u tome što su knjižnice bile zatvorene 2020. pa je to nekako populariziralo ono što možda nije do tada vidljivo, znači koje sve te digitalne i virtualne usluge knjižnice imaju i inače.
Da vežbamo, da presučemo.
Trenutno je dostupno više od 1000 naslova za odrasle i 40-ak naslova za djecu. To su sve većinom knjige, odnosno ne da su većinom, nego to jesu knjige na hrvatskom jeziku, jer smo se vodili za standardima za narodne knjižnice kojima nam je propisano da u principu narodne knjižnice prikupljaju knjige na svom jeziku, odnosno hrvatskom jeziku u ovom slučaju, a tek 10% fonda mogu nam činiti knjige na drugim jezicima, tako da nismo nabavljali previše knjiga na engleskom jeziku. I ono što članovi najviše posuđuju, to je isto kao i sa tiskanom knjigom, dakle najviše posuđuju najnovije naslove i to uglavnom naslove za razonodu, kriminalističke i ljubavne romane.
Hvala. Da li bi samo prošla kroz slajdove, pošto ih nismo vidjeli?
Aha. Niste ih vidjeli?
Makar na našim ovdje ekranima. Samo par sekundi da vidimo kako izgleda aplikacija.
Dakle, jel vidite sad slajdove?
Da bi vidio, nego mora biti zvučeno.
Vidimo početni slajd, makar ovdje na našim ekranima.
Aha, on se neće vrtiti kod vas, samo trenutak.
Mora ručno, vjerovatno.
Samo trenutak.
I do hope that Sander and Michaela can hear interpretation well in English. Okay, thank you. Janja, predlažem da krenemo dalje, pa možda možemo da na kraju samo to radimo. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on and a short presentation from Mikkel Christoffersen, Chief Consultant at Copenhagen Libraries. Please, Mikkel, take the floor about eRoland.dk. Just unmute, please.
So can you hear me? And are you seeing a blue screen?
Yes, everything is well. Thank you.
Good. Taking it very seriously when you asked me to keep it to 5 minutes. So this is just sort of the basics of the Danish service. A couple of definitions here. eReolen is the ebook case in English. That is the name of our national service. It's actually 3 services, eReolen and eReolen Go, which is for children. It is all the books on eReolen which are marked as for children or young people. And it's eReolen Global, which is all our English language books, which is offered through Overdrive. So that's actually a separate service, even though we have an eReolen skin on it. And this is what our global, the Overdrive service looks like. And this is our eReolen Go for children and young people. And this is just sort of the standard first screen you see on eReolen Classic, if you will, or the proper service. And all these services are available through the web and through Android and iOS apps. And the basics of the service is that we are almost 6 million people in Denmark now. And on the service, we have a little more than 80,000 titles from over 400 publishers. We are going to have more than 7 million loans in 2021. We've crossed 7 million already, but it's only like 2 weeks left of the month and the year. And we just crossed 700,000 unique users for the year. We've been going for over 10 years now. We had our 10 years anniversary in November, and we've had trouble along the way, and there has been some major struggles with especially the big publishing houses. But since 2018, we've actually been friends, and we have a rather unique collaborative climate with our publishers now. Our apps and our websites are homemade. We do them ourselves, except of course from the Overdrive one. And we really excel at sort of the Danish literature, what I've chosen to call literary literature, which is sort of the, oh, did I hit this? And especially children's literature. This is not my words, this is actually what our publishers tell us. And they also say that after we had these all these struggles and these wars almost, that they've changed their minds now, because a lot of Danish publishers are now expanding to Europe, especially Poland, Russia, other places where there hasn't been much of an ebook offering. And they now see that when they go into new markets and there's not a big library presence, it's a very difficult market. But if there is a big library presence digitally, it's much easier to actually also sell books. So this is a pretty important point. We have 3 lending models in the service, which basically corresponds to the life cycle of a book. When it's first published, it needs to be sort of protected. So that's where we tend to use one copy, one user, where the digital book behaves like a physical book. So when I have it, you can't have it. You have to stand in line for it. Then after a couple of months, when the first interest, okay, somebody is just taking my slides forward. It's not me, I swear, I'm not touching anything.
Okay.
So once the book has a few months, it tends to go into this one copy multiple users, which is much more what you would expect an ebook to be like, so everybody can get to it. And in the end, when nobody cares about it, it can go into more of a flat rate model, which we also have, where we pay one sum for just thousands of books and everybody can get to them. This is a number of titles we've had on the left since 2013. The blue are ebooks, the red are audiobooks. And on the right is the number of loans we've had since 2013. Again, blue is ebooks, red is audiobooks. And as you can see, we have a lot more ebooks than we do audiobooks, but we loan a lot more audiobooks than we do ebooks. The audiobooks have really taken off. And this is sort of a zooming in on. We've had 2 lockdown periods in Denmark. The first was in the spring of 2020. You can probably see where the spike is, and then we had another one in January 2021. What's interesting about these spikes is that it was the ebooks, the audiobooks spiked as well, but it was basically the ebooks who really took off. And that was because of desperate parents and desperate teachers who needed something for their children to read. So this is basically mostly children's ebooks that are spiking. And you can also see that once the spikes are over, the audiobooks have leveled off on a much higher level than the ebooks, which are coming back down to normal almost. And my last slide is just saying that these growth rates are simply not sustainable, because we are now really taking money from the physical library and putting into the digital library. We are extremely happy with all the success we've had with our digital loans, but it's almost becoming too much now, and we can't actually find the money to keep funding this growth. So we are now struggling with our own success. I know it sounds like a luxury problem, but it is an actual problem, trying to find the funds in the physical library for this, because we're not getting more money for libraries in total. So that was it for me.
Yeah, great, thank you. And sorry for these gremlins with your presentation. Okay, so that was Mikkel from Denmark, and let's hear Sander, of course, from the Netherlands, our colleague from the National Library of the Netherlands, who is going to say something, of course, about their project onlinebibliotheek.nl. Sander, please.
Okay. Can you all hear me and see the slide? Okay. I'm assuming that is a yes, and Mikkel
Yes.
nodded. So okay, great. So first of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. So as Mikkel said, I would also try to keep it seriously to the 5 minutes. I think the slides, Mikkel, were sort of trying to pace you along to make sure you were getting to the 5 minutes. So let's see what happens here. So first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Sander van Kempen. I work at the National Library of the Netherlands. I'm also a member of the IFLA Standing Committee Public Libraries and a member of the NAPOL Forum. And I would like to tell you a bit about the ebooks in the Netherlands, what has happened and what is happening currently. Here you see a screenshot of the homepage. Actually, I was a bit disappointed.
Sander, sorry, you're not in presentation mode.
That is strange.
We don't see the next slide. Okay.
Now you do?
Now we do. So just if you do it from there.
Okay. Let's see. Do you see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, then I will use a different button here. So a little bit, just going back to this screen, I thought this was a bit disappointing. Normally we have a much nicer homepage with some really great graphics, but it's about books. So here you go. So talking a bit about the aspects of the ebook service. As you can see, there's some screenshots of the app that we have, and also of the website. So the app, we started with 2 separate apps for ebooks and audiobooks, and now they're merged into one. And that is the screenshot there. So talking a bit about the ebooks, I think most important thing is talking about the legal base, because that sort of determines a lot about collection, etc., and negotiations. So in the Netherlands, there is no ebook law. This is contrary to physical books. I think this is true for most of Europe. Almost all European countries have a law for physical books and a right for for libraries to be able to lend out physical books, but this is not true for ebooks. So basically what this means is that we have to do everything via negotiations with publishers and authors. So there's a lot of debate recently about publishers asking high prices or refusing. Of course, this is not great for a library, but they're entitled to do so. I will get back to that. My train of thought is that there's something else is going on, but hopefully we'll get to that in the discussion. So that means that if there's no legal base, then basically we're talking about the license. The license we have is roughly like Mikkel explained. It's a 1-copy multiple use license that goes for all the titles that we have. So that means that there is no queue. You can always lend any title which is in there. And this was has been the point from the start in 2014 until today. I think this is one of the reasons why it is successful in the Netherlands, but it also has some downsides. For instance, getting publishers from other countries like English-speaking countries to add content to it. We pay publishers per loan, publishers and authors per loan, and we pay publishers and we pay authors also directly. So the fee per loan differs. The more recent the title, the higher the price. And if it's get older, like we see in Mikkel's slide as well, moving more towards the let's say the long tail, then the price gets lower as well. So how many accounts do we have? So a little more than 400,000 accounts. Most of them are. We
don't see those figures. If it is in the next slide, sorry, Sander.
That's strange. Do you see it now?
No,
Hang on.
no.
I'll
Okay.
go
There we go.
back.
It's because we're seeing your editing window, Sander.
Okay. Do you see it now or not?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
side there? Okay. If it doesn't work in presentation mode, I will just use the editing window. That is fine as well. But let's, because this is bigger and more visible, let's see if this works. So the 420,000 accounts, as you can see, doesn't work, Bogdan?
No, it is kind of small letters, you know, for the audience here in the physical space. Can you make it? Can you make it presentation mode?
I will try. Is this better?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
We need figures, so those images on the right.
So just, you know, forget about the nice screenshots. It's all about the figures.
yeah.
So I will just,
Figures.
so you see all the bullets.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
that's good. Then I will just talk through it. So 95% of the accounts originate from a subscription by or via local library. In the Netherlands, there are two ways how you can get a subscription on the ebooks. One is via the local library. And then if you are a member or patron of a local library, you sort of, you can lend out physical books, but you get access to the ebooks and audiobooks as well for the same price. If you don't want physical books, you don't want to be a member of the local library, you can also sort of become a member or get a subscription directly on the online bibliotheek. We call that digital only members. And you can see that out of the 420,000, roughly 5% originate from that way. So basically, this is, as it started, an add-on for a local library subscription. The user appreciation of the service, so that's sort of the total, that's the collection, that's the apps, the way it works, everything. The help desk that we have is at 7.7, so it's a good enough. It's rising through the years. Of course, we still feel that there's room for improvement, but it's okay. The collection now consists of a little more than 35,000 ebooks and 7,000 audiobooks. I was looking at this morning and was wondering how much of the total market this is. I think there's roughly around 55,000 ebooks. I'm not really sure about audiobooks. So we have a good enough percentage on it, but we don't have the total market for ebooks. So you see that we get almost 5 million ebook loans of these 35,000 titles and 1.8 million ebook loans. And looking at the percentages, or you can also see, like Mikko explained, that the audiobooks are going better, or at least there are more loans to that. So the technical side is that we have a website and we have an ebook, an app. So that's one app for audiobooks and ebooks as well. People can read on e-readers in the browser, on phone or tablet via the app. And we have two kinds of DRM. DRM stands for Digital Rights Management. So we have the one for the e-readers, which is the Adobe DRM. And the other is more of a watermark social DRM that works in the app. So if you want to have a look at it, then there's the website. You can ask me. And let me conclude by hope to see you all in Rotterdam for the World Library Information Congress in 2023. So that is it for me for now.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I hope that it's not going to be a hybrid or online in 2023.
I hope so as well, but I think since we're here, I would love to welcome and shake your hand physical, but if you cannot join for whatever reason, I would still hope there is a physical or a hybrid possibility to do so.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to hear Marko Herzog, of course. Marko is luckily with us, and I'm quite thankful to him for joining us for this conference. He was able to come from Slovenia. Marko is in charge of Biblos.se, portal for ebooks, and now we're going to see his presentation, hopefully. Just to share your screen. Full screen. The rest of the group online, can you see this?
Better. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hello also from my side. The mic. For difference, I'm not coming actually from the library world. I'm actually based in publishing. Although Beletrina, which is the organization which I come from, it's like a quite a variety of things we do in our service. And one of the things was, let's say like 10 years ago, we also started with ebooks. And since there was a situation in Slovenia where people were starting reading in other languages using Kindle and reading in English, primarily we saw that the only possible solution, since there was no signals from the governmental side that there will be something done, we actually decided to do the platform, national platform by ourselves. Of course, we did it with cooperation with libraries, and what was one of the most important thing, we actually started talking also with the library system. So COBISS, which is also used here in Serbia, is the major system in Slovenia, and we implemented it from the scratch. So users actually didn't do anything, probably didn't have any problems because of the books itself. So business model, it wasn't this one from the beginning. We actually were operating the first year on some different model, and after 1 year, we switched to a model which is license model. So it means library by license, which consists of the 52 loans, and number of simultaneous loans are actually defined by a library itself. So it can be from 1 to 52. Usually they set it between 5 and 10, but during the COVID, we've seen some completely different spikes. So the price for the book is something set by the publisher. It definitely is the same as a retail price, since our platform is also used for selling books, since this was the demand from the publisher, but it's quite, let's say, a low sale. It's because we are mostly focusing on lending services, and publishers usually set up price from 10 to 50% lower than the print book. We have all national libraries included in our system, plus not national, public libraries. We then have national library, both national libraries, university libraries, and some smaller libraries, and library for visually impaired, specialized library for visually impaired, which is in Slovenia. From the tech side, we have apps, iOS, Android, and Huawei platform. We are using desktop applications. We are working on the Adobe, so it used through Adobe Digital Editions. And we are using the Adobe DRM, which is quite hard because we are still in Balkan area, and considering hacking books, it's still sport in our country and the neighboring countries. So to please all the publishers, our books needs to be, let's say, waterproof, so they are not leaking the system itself. And from the beginning itself, we have worked on supporting e-readers, e-devices, and we have managed to establish cooperation with one manufacturer, which has agreed to implement Biblos as a service, so the users don't have a problem syncing books and getting content into them, and the device itself is translated in Slovenia. From the beginning, we also did specialized models which were meant exactly for libraries, since they had library interface, which was let's say only with basic functions, so users actually just loan the books and read the books. All other functionalities were disabled, and being only library administrators were able to approach them. So every time when user was landing the device, when he turned it back, it just library administrator just reset it to default settings, and it was ready for next one. Nowadays, it's they are not in use anymore, since the actually readers have quite a lot of them now. Now we have like 4th generation of them. I have one with me. I can show it with you, because now the bigger screens are also appearing now. Now we are not working anymore just on 6-inch smaller devices, but also, let's say, this one is an 8-inch screen. And very important on this one is that letters can be quite big here. This was our actual demand, so it means that the people with very low percentage of sight, with low visibility, can actually read very, very large letters. So the person who has less than 5% of the vision left is still able to read. And before those things came out, it was actually not possible for them to read. Also, quite a lot of people started to read because of those devices, because they have enabled them to read again on a quite larger scale of letters than they are in printed books. So a bit about statistics. On the left screen, you can see quite a view of what happened in previous years from 2014, and the light blue, it's 2020, the COVID year. You can see the first spike. In Slovenia, we had 2 lockdowns, and you can see the first one, which just exploded in a month to a sky high. And then it went down slowly, and then it went up again when in October, November, when we again had a lockdown. So previously, our years were, we had like an organic growth. It was a peak in June, July, August, when the people were actually commuting to and going to holidays, and they read more mobile, not the physical books, but when the COVID year came, it actually just distorted everything. So this 2020 statistics are not something that would be, because when we see 2021 statistics, which is the dark dotted line, it's actually a bit more similar to previous year, although it's quite higher, because with COVID, we gained quite a lot of new users, and it's following that normal behavior through a year. So when it was the strongest year, we actually had like over 320,000 loans per year. Users went up to 36,000. At the moment, we have around 40,000 active users. So it means they are actually loaning books, not just lended book once. And we are still seeing that there is a growth in everything here. We also see that with approach of new technologies like readers are actually, we are gaining new readers with new devices, because let's say type of thing is quite popular now in Slovenia. It's sold like 5 to 10 pieces per day. People actually decided to read on a dedicated devices, not on their mobile phones or desktop computers or iPads or something like this, since those devices are actually something that doesn't include any distraction form. So when the email comes in on the tablet or on the phone, somebody will take a look at it and it's just distracting the reader. But with those devices, you actually don't have any distraction point. In our system are probably every publisher in Slovenia except one, the bigger one, but their major business decision is that they won't deal with ebooks. But they are mostly publishing, let's say, a bit romance literature and a bit more active romance literature. So this is a bit different. So we have around slightly less than 6,000 titles in the library currently in, let's say, like 10 languages, although we are primarily focusing on Slovenian language, but we have around, let's say, 800, 900 books from the area of former Yugoslavia. So quite a lot of readers are from that area, and of course quite a lot of people that spoke language live in Slovenia. And maybe I forgot to mention before, our system is also present in Croatia, since the libraries from Istria approached us, and then we have implemented their user interface. So all the libraries in Istria, 9 libraries, are now included in our system, plus Osijek library, and we also have implemented the interface from Metovin, which is their COBIS, one of the library programs in Croatia, so it can be now used for user integration. So Osijek library is also now for a year part of our system, and next year we are expecting some more libraries in Croatia to be part of our system. We have a steady growth of titles. We are also planning support of audiobooks. We already have technology to support it, but Slovenia actually don't have any actual audiobooks. It's quite more expensive to produce them, to start produce them. We have started production this year. We are doing now them constantly. We're also doing a lot with AI so it engine reading books, which would be quite okay for non-fiction books to be produced, since I think it's at least 300 titles that you need to have to start the system, and we expect to reach that peak next year and publish audiobooks also in our system. So I think I've spent my 5 minutes. Thank you.
More, but no problem. Okay, thank you, Marko. You can stay. Okay, so we wanted also to hear something from Alexandra Rašić from Rašić Publishing Company, because they are selling actually ebooks here from Serbia on multiple platforms, but unfortunately, colleague Rašić couldn't join us today. It is a shame, because it would be another voice of the publisher speaking with most of us from the library sector. But nevertheless, I do hope that we are going to, we got this insight about the 4 countries which are dealing with ebooks, dealing in true sense of this word, and ebook lending, of course, in libraries. And I wanted to start some discussion with my panelists with a couple of questions I prepared for this meeting. And one of these questions are quite, from my perspective, is a natural follow-up of what Mikkel said at the end of his presentation. It was a kind of a concern about the sustainability, right, Mikkel? Because my question is, what is the biggest challenge with ebooks from your perspective or experience? So please, can you say something on this matter?
Yes, in the first couple of years, when we had digital lending, we were mostly concerned with getting access to as many books as possible from the publishers who, as you know, don't have to sell us access or give us access, unlike in the physical world where we can just go and buy the books because we all have exemptions in our legislation. So we were worried about people bypassing the library if we didn't have a digital offer. And so we tried to make that as good as possible, and we tried to negotiate the prices. And as I said, when we've succeeded in doing this, we get a new problem, which is that it's slowly sort of sucking all our money to this digital service. And to my mind, at least, it has to be a service. It cannot be, most of the library cannot be digital. Then it becomes something else, I believe. But I don't actually have a way of stopping it, as I can see. So that's a new kind of weird problem you get once you've succeeded in solving the first problem. And I think that historically, in almost all countries in the world, they have some sort of library system. And in all of the free world, we have public libraries. Even in very capitalistic societies like America, the taxpayers are willing to pay for physical libraries. But they're willing to pay for a library that has a building and some staff and books and that you can visit. Nobody ever asked if they wanted to fund it with taxpayers' money if it was mostly digital. So not only are we sort of we're in danger of putting all our money on the digital part, we don't actually know if the public is behind this. So this is the kind of thing I'm wondering right now.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to say something about this dilemma, or maybe a kind of threat to ebooks for the future? Yes, Sander, please, and Janja, of course.
Ladies first, or?
Thank you. Very polite. Janja.
Hrvatski ili engleski?
Može na hrvatski.
Pa evo, ja sam se htjela nadovezati na kolegu Kristofersona. Znači, mi imamo isti problem na način da, bez obzira što već 3 godine imamo uslugu posudbu e-knjige, još uvijek ne dobivamo posebna sredstva za nabavu te vrste građe, znači tretiraju je kao i tiskanu knjigu, a sredstva se naravno nisu povećala. Znači, mi povećavamo broj usluga, osobito u ovom digitalnom, a ne dobivamo sredstva. A drugi problem koji nam se događa, posebice zato što se radi o manjem tržištu, znači e-knjiga je sama po sebi skupa i za nakladnike, ne samo kod nas za knjižnice, i u stvari je naše tržište vrlo ograničeno. Dakle, mi smo trenutno dosegli nabavu svih naslova koji su dostupni na hrvatskom jeziku, i ako ostanemo na toj razini, znači ne potaknemo nakladnike na veću produkciju novih naslova, gubit ćemo i svoje članove koji koriste tu vrstu usluge, jer će pročitati sve knjige koje su dostupne u našem katalogu. Ne? Dakle, imamo više tih problema koji se pojavljuju. Znači, osim što morate uvjeriti osnivače i financijere da prepoznaju tu vrstu usluge kao novu, dakle, recimo, to je jedan od problema zašto nemamo zvučne knjige kao takve. Ne? Znači, uopće ne postoje na tržištu za širu upotrebu, postoji samo jedna aplikacija koja je privatna inicijativa i također se radi o skupim knjigama. Znači, sve vam govorim o nečemu što je kao toliko pristupačno, a u stvari košta jednako kao i tiskana knjiga, u nekim slučajevima čak i nešto skuplje. Ne? I onda još imamo taj problem da ni nakladnici nisu prepoznali to kao isplativu investiciju i nešto u što bi ulagali, pa da nama donosi neki novac.
Okay, thank you very much, and I do hope that our translators could manage to follow up you. And I have to say, for yesterday and today, great job for our interpretations for translators. It is a tough thing to do such hybrid event. Sorry, Sander, you wanted also to follow up this issue.
Yeah, sure. I will try to talk slowly for the translators as well. I agree with Mikkel. We have the same problem with regards to funding, because we, as I explained, we pay per loan, and we saw the same spikes as Mikkel explained and Marco showed in the COVID response. So we saw some huge number of loans, which means that we have to pay the publishers. And of course, the publishers and the authors are happy. Now, this is in the Netherlands, we have basically the digital library and the physical library are two separate subsidies. So one, the physical library goes via the municipalities, and the digital library comes directly from the Ministry of Culture. But still, this doesn't mean that there's sort of unlimited spending there. Basically, we had to also cut some activities last year, and we're still not sure that we will get more funding, because we also see that the number of loans are at a higher level than sort of the before COVID. So it sort of feels like, it also Mikkel explained, that you're sort of a victim of your own success. And I feel that is one part of the problem. It is, of course, a problem that needs to be solved in order to grow. But I think there's an other fundamental issue, and it has to do with titles and access. I see a lot of discussion between publishers and public libraries and basically the trade publishers, because when I say publishers, there are different kind of publishers. They all behave differently. So if I talk about publishers, I talk about trade publishers, which are the publishers that offer sort of the general fiction, non-fiction for public libraries. And what I see is that we have a lot of discussion about access and fundamental issues like access to information. But I think what we're forgetting is that we need each other. We have a mutual goal. Without publishers, there's nothing to, or authors, we can't, we need them to produce titles and create great titles. And what I see in the Netherlands, and I'm not really sure if that is the same case in other countries, I feel that as libraries, we're basically not doing a great job explaining the power that public libraries have, which we can use for publishers. So basically, we sometimes assume the publishers know what we do and know that that we represent thousands and millions of readers and people who are interested in books. And if you talk to publishers and they look at their sheets and figures, I'm not really sure that we're on the same page there. So explaining about what public libraries do, why we're there, and what we can do to make them make the chain or the book as a whole better. I think that is a fundamental issue that we're not doing right now, or we can do better.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that my next question is some kind of natural follow-up of this. If we are talking about the problem of making a budget or extending our budgets for buying material like e-books, parallel to the physical books, print books, what do you think about the current situation with legislation, being a national or international legislation? For instance, I think that Sander showed us in his presentation that in the Netherlands there is no e-book law, right? So for the government, for the system, somehow maybe that's the reason why e-books are not recognized on that level as we as librarians would like to see it. So this is a question for all of us, of course. For all of you, actually. What do you think about the current status? Do we need separate laws, or we can squeeze e-books within the current legislation? For instance, the Copyright Act in Serbia doesn't deal with electronic material per se, of course. You can just notice in some parts of it that you can you can deal with ebooks, but not per se, of course. So, what's your opinion about the current legislation in your countries, or maybe in the EU, generally speaking?
Well, my perspective is I used to work at a trade publishing firm, so I'm not really sure that legislation is the solution. I think that there, like I explained before, I think there's a fundamental other issue that has to do with understanding what all the actors are capable of in doing, and I think we should focus on that, because I think that's a much more sustainable and long-term discussion and more positive than looking towards legislation. I still feel that legislation is sort of the last resort, and that is also something that will take a long time. So these two sort of roads can go parallel. We can work together on one side and still sort of have the fundamental issue of legislation, because we still we have in the Netherlands, we have a library law, and one of the ground principles is that we should provide access to information. That doesn't mean that it should be in the form of an ebook. It could be in the form of a paper book, because that's information as well, or it could be in some other form. So I'm not really sure that we should rally around getting towards legislation. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, of course.
But there is actually one thing that when the EU legislation was about the tax law, I don't know if this was implemented on the level of all European states. I know in Slovenia we actually got it like 2 years ago, since before the books were actually ebooks were actually taxed quite higher. So now they have a 5% tax, and it's a completely different story. Otherwise, I think there won't be any legislation on that, and that would actually affect anything, considering ebook on the market itself.
I see raised hands. Maybe we should also again give Janja first.
Pokušat ću sporije govoriti. Dakle, ja ću se nadovezati na kolegu Marka. U Hrvatskoj je također to bio problem koji je sada riješen. Znači, smanjen je PDV na e-knjigu i izjednačena je sa tiskanom knjigom, ali ono što je ostalo problem i što nije regulirano, a u Hrvatskoj postoji zakon o knjizi koji regulira tržište tiskane knjige, a to je na koji način mi pregovaramo sa nakladnicima, odnosno naš agregator, oko cijene knjige, odnosno oko cijene licenca. Znači, mi kupujemo 52 licence. To smo si kao uzeli između ostalog pomalo i po uzoru na Sloveniju i njihove modele posudbe. I jedan takav naslov u jednoj izdavačkoj kući vam košta kao da ste kupili jednu tu knjigu za 52 licence, a druga izdavačka kuća će vam prodati kao da vam prodaje u stvari 3 knjige. Znači, nas neki naslov u jednoj izdavačkoj kući može koštati oko 100-150 kuna, između koliko se kreće cijena e-knjiga, dok u drugoj izdavačkoj kući ćete tako isto jedan naslov plaćati 500 kuna. Tako da to je u stvari neuređeno tržište. A s druge strane moramo raditi na tome da dodatno potičemo nakladnike na izdavanje te vrste građe, jer mislimo da jedino na tako malom tržištu način kako da se razvije to tržište je u stvari posudba kroz knjižnice, odnosno kupovanje e-knjiga kroz knjižnice, zato što su sve dosadašnji pokušaji u Hrvatskoj propali upravo zato što oni nisu poslovno isplativi.
Thank you. Mikhail, please.
Yeah, about legislation. I mean, when we got all our publishers on board, it was not because we threatened them with legislation or coming legislation. but as I think Sander also alluded to, if we were able to persuade them and show them that there are different things that we could move, different kinds of literature that is not very commercial, that has little commercial success. So they could have like the 1%, 2%, 3%. They could move on the commercial platforms, and we could move the rest of the 97%, and especially children's literature. But also we have also grown the digital market. I saw in Marco's presentation a little less than 6,000 titles. So when you're at that amount of titles, you will necessarily fight over the same titles. Once you get to the 80,000 titles, which we've been lucky enough to do, the publishers can move some things over here and some things, and so they can use different channels. I also think that in the trade market, it's not so much pricing is not that much of a problem as it is with the university market, where at least British and American publishers are really being bastards. I'm sorry, but they are really stealing money away, and it's horrible. It's not that bad in the trade market. And finally, we do have legislation, and we have the European Court of Justice ruling from 2016. And it's not so practically usable, because it states that basically that if a library has an ebook, they are allowed to loan it if they do it in a one copy, one user model, and the writer gets the author gets some compensation. And we can all do that, but it doesn't say anything about pricing or availability, so it's not very practical. And when we will come to another fight with publishers, because money is getting tight. And we will try this in Denmark, and I also chair the NAPL expert group on e-lending. So I am talking with Stuart Hamilton and Sander about making our expert group more of a workshop, and try to, in the new year in 2022, talk about how can we actually make this European Court of Justice ruling a little more usable, and do some mild, friendly threats, not big threats, because then we'll just chase the publishers away. But we are librarians, friendly threats.
Okay, thank you. A friendly librarian. Carry a gun and speak slowly. Okay, thank you.
A friendly gun.
This is a quite interesting discussion. And it shows really that the situation is not perfect, far from it, of course. But probably we should also tackle the question about the ebook market development. You mentioned something about certain publishers behaving this or that. So this is, Michele mentioned it, but the question is for all of us, of course. What do you think about the recent development of ebook market in recent years, particularly in terms of the prices, of course, offerings, remuneration for authors and publishers, etc. So this would be quite interesting to hear from all of you involved from the publishing sector or negotiating with the publishing sector. How do you find the development of the ebook market? And maybe you can connect that with my next question. Where do you see the market maybe in 1, 2, or 5 years from now? So it is open question, and also the auditorium here can join the discussion if you want. Just ask for the mic. So maybe Marco.
Just to switch to the camera.
Yeah, thank you.
So in Slovenia, we had quite a unique situation since we had no market. We have to build it, we have to grow it, and we didn't cope with the problems like Michele was experiencing from the beginning. So we somehow negotiated the business model, which was agreed with some publishers, other not, but what was the main thing that we needed to do? We needed to educate publishers what ebook actually means. What does it mean to buying rights from, let's say, from scratch, and then to produce ebooks, EPUBs from the scratch. And it took us like 5 years to establish a market, which is now going on some inertia. So the publisher now find their way how to do it. They do it by inertia. They do it with some kind of organic grow, and what was the most of all, they all fear the cannibalization of ebook towards the printed book, and it actually showed up that this is just a revenue stream that is not diverting into sales numbers which they would expect it. So it's let's say it's just win-win situation for everybody in our situation. So now we have quite good situation. We don't have to struggle anymore, although we are kind of limited still, that we have, let's say, small number, but it's enough to work normally. But I see that more can be solved, like Mikkel and Sandra mentioned before, with through the discussion than through some kind of legislation or something like this. Although I got some signals and some phone calls from the National Library, which are thinking about scanning books and enabling them and stuff like this. But this is a completely different topics. But there still are some try to establish. Let's say a market of the books which are not in the market, and this is the major problem concerning myself. How actually to get into the catalog titles that are not available, but they are still not the open public considering the rights. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would. I think we have to treat different publishers with different approaches, and well, the science and scientific market is a bit further from me. I agree with Mikkel that it's mostly money driven, financially driven. So there's some really big issues there, I think, in that market. But I also see a more development in open access and support of that. So I think there are two ways in dealing with that. But the fundamental thing is, of course, that we should have access to scientific research, because that is basically a very important way to grow as a society. So sort of cutting that off. And I think that the strange thing is somehow most of the research is done by universities, is publicly funded, and then somehow we created a model where we publish about these findings, then we go to a publisher because they have the really big magazines that are well known, and that has to do with I think a career of a science person, and then we have to pay, and then we're sort of in this locked system where the publisher can ask what he wants. I think we sort of need to rethink what we created altogether and talk about if this is sustainable for the future. But looking more towards the trade market, I also agree that we should have different conversations with the publishers, because one of the things we saw as a result of COVID, we saw these spikes, and that meant that the publishers and authors are getting more money. So they're not that sort of, they don't have a problem. They're basically, we see the same spikes in e-commerce offset of books as well. So for the publisher and authors, 2020 and 21 have been great years. The booksellers are the ones that are in trouble. The physical booksellers in the Netherlands, they are at getting the short end of the stick. So that is something that is, yeah, we need the booksellers as well as a whole. So I think that the funding issue is something that sort of hurts the public libraries, but it doesn't in the short term hurt the publishers or the authors. But we should talk about, I think, sort of seeing where the public libraries can add value to, and I agree with Marco that we should use, for instance, subsidies to digitize books that are not there. where where we can approach publishers and authors to digitize them and then make them available for booksellers, but for public libraries as well, because more titles are a bigger market and it's a bigger share of all of us. And if you look at the publishers, the trade publishers in the Netherlands, you see that the booksellers are still 80% of their turnover. So this is the commercial market, but the booksellers are sort of merging. So you get sort of the market power of an Amazon or others having a lot of market share and sort of dictating terms and conditions. And I see that, for instance, one of the results from that is that it's getting risk averse, and where a publisher needs money to develop talent, to develop new writers, he doesn't have that luxury. So I would say, as public libraries, we can do something in helping the publishers develop talent and develop that as a whole. So all in all, I think that we should focus our efforts and conversations on a more sustainable future, having more of a long-term goal and view than on the short term on legislation and on prices, etc. These, of course, we're still hurting on the short term, but I think this is also an opportunity to talk about more sort of long-term issues and goals.
Okay, thank you, Sander. Janja, I see raised hand.
Pa evo, ja sam se htjela samo nadovezati na neke probleme koje su nama konkretno u razgovorima nakladnici rekli prilikom pregovora oko kupovine e-knjiga, a jedno od njih je svakako to da ta cijena e-knjige u Hrvatskoj barem je gotovo identična tiskanoj, prije svega i zbog autorskih prava. Dakle, svaki nakladnik mora platiti autorska prava posebno za izdavanje e-knjige. Dakle, to im nisu ista autorska prava. Onda, recimo, knjižnice grada Zagreba su naravno razmišljale i o zvučnim knjigama, ali i proizvodnja zvučne knjige je dosta financijski zahtjevna i, kao što sam spomenula, postoji u Hrvatskoj aplikacija za kupovinu, ne posudbu, zvučne knjige, zove se Zvukbook, i te knjige imaju svoju visoku cijenu. Znači, kada bi mi uspjeli kroz ovaj naš sustav i aplikaciju koja je izrađena zato da bi u nekom trenutku uvela i posudbu audio knjiga, nažalost i ta će nam cijena biti opet jednako velika kao i ostalo. Tako da, evo, ja sad govorim najviše iz perspektive hrvatskog tržišta koje je malo i u stvari mi ne možemo sve ove nove usluge bez neke potpore države i ministarstva koje moraju prepoznati da su i oni ti koji moraju poticati takvu vrstu produkcije, pa se u stvari nadamo, gdje još uvijek nije to prepoznato, a to je da recimo postoji i otkup e-knjiga. Mi znači znamo da postoji otkup tiskanih knjiga, ali ne postoji otkup e-knjiga. Pa tako, eto, nadamo se da ćemo kao recimo najjača narodna i najveća narodna knjižnica u Hrvatskoj, koja ujedno pomoću ove aplikacije omogućuje posudbu e-knjiga i u ostalim knjižnicama u Hrvatskoj, potaknuti na neke promjene u poslovanju i ministarstva, ali i nakladnika.
Hvala, thank you. Mikkel, please.
Yeah, just a few short things. First of all, we see in Denmark, at least what Sander also was talking about, a consolidation of publishers, like in all media companies, and they're not betting, or they're not being very creative. They're betting on known, sure successes. I'm pretty sure in your country as well, when you look at what's in the cinema, it's just remake after remake after remake of things that have been working since the 1980s. And I think the library in figuring out what our role is, for instance, to point to all the other wonderful things there are And we have in Denmark, we have been very active in retro digitization, making public-private partnerships with publishers, getting their things. We don't do the digitizing, but we help with the selection and in promoting it afterwards. And so we got thousands of titles on our service that way, which is also good because the more titles, prices should be going down. And a final, but that's a little bit more nerdy, sort of literature nerd thing, is that when audiobooks are running away from ebooks as they are right now, the literature itself changes because our publishers, they look at books, they look at manuscripts, not as books now, but as audiobooks. And so the structure of the narrative cannot be as complicated. You cannot have so many flashbacks, you cannot have many viewpoints, because that's confusing when you're only listening. So now the literature is actually changing in order to be better audiobooks. And we also are facing that the audio controlled control of your iPad, of your computer. And so now children down to the age of 2 can actually become consumers, because they can order things. And it used to be that you had to be able to type, you had to be able to write in order to become a consumer. But Google and Amazon are pushing these audio controlled devices to children. And so suddenly we have sort of children consumers, which is really strange. And it's sort of a brave new world that we have to find ourselves in. But if there's one lesson, at least from Denmark, it is to find your place in the market and be really vocal about what it is that you do best, and that publishers cannot get anywhere else. And the final thing is just as Netflix will do these Netflix originals, now our audiobook publishers, our international audiobook, they will do, it's called Storytel, this company, it's in many different European countries. They are doing Storytel originals. They only come out digitally, and you have to be a subscriber to the Storytel service. So it's a new kind of literature that bypasses libraries. We don't actually have the entire literary cultural heritage now. So again, now more than ever, what it is that libraries do best and why they can't live without us, and be really vocal about that. That's what we've been doing, at least.
Yeah, thank you. That's a quite strong message for all of us here. And I do hope that both here in the physical space and online, we are going to think about this need for getting together to have stronger voice, of course. Not against, but to make us stronger in terms of cooperation, negotiation, and cooperation with these other sectors. And my final question, and just a short one, is related to this, what you all mentioned about the strong growth for audiobooks and actually their usage, their landing in libraries. Probably we can relate that to the average profile of users of ebooks and audiobooks. So can you tell us something from your point of view or from your statistics? Who is the average user of or audiobooks in your countries?
Shall I kick it off? Well, since you see that most of the subscription come from the public library, it's not that surprising that the average sort of the image of the average user is the same as the average user in the public libraries. So it's mostly a woman because they love reading. They're not 15 or 25; they're a bit older. So basically, it's the hardcore public library user that uses the digital services as well. We see if we put really good effort that what we're doing right now, for instance, to involve youth and get them to start reading. Not necessarily on the ebook, but just get them to start reading, physical or digital, or we don't care, because they're the future. If they don't read, we can all go home. and we have a big challenge there. I think that goes in all the countries. That is something that demands a lot of effort, and I think that this is also something that you can point out to publishers as well. We're creating readers for you, because if these youngsters are not reading by the age of 4, the chances that they won't read when they're able to buy a book are enormous. So if we focus our efforts there, this is something that benefits the publishers and authors as well. So I would say that we should move, I think, at least in the Netherlands, where we're sort of getting to the point that we spend a lot of time and effort and money in sort of creating a system where, well, quite basically, you have a person that is reading a lot, and we make it easier to read even more. So is this something that we should to use subsidies for, and these enormous time and energy spent? I think we should focus our efforts elsewhere, on, for instance, on youth, but also, for instance, on people that are not speaking the language or are able to read because they come from another country. I think that is something that we should focus our efforts on. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, we have raised hands by Anna and then Mikkel.
Pa evo, ja ću samo kratko o profilu znači naših korisnika, osobito s obzirom da nisam uspjela izvrtiti svoju prezentaciju na kojem djelomično postoje podaci o tome. Dakle, mi smo, većina naših korisnika koji koriste posudbu e-knjige su uglavnom zaposleni ljudi, znači odrasli, koji, znači to je životna dob nekakva između 35 i 45 godina. Što se tiče dječje e-knjige koju su knjižnice grada Zagreba uvele u ovoj godini čitanja, znači Hrvatska je proglasila 2021. godinom čitanja, i to je bila jedna od glavnih usluga koje smo mi uveli povodom godine čitanja, znači posudbu dječje knjige. I ono što nam je bilo zanimljivo, da u ovom trenutku, znači kada smo imali već odraslu knjigu i uveli posudbu dječje e-knjige, kada pogledamo svoje statistike, da doista tu dječju e-knjigu posuđuju, znači korisnici, odnosno jer imamo razdvojene te dvije kategorije, znači koriste doista djeca, ne? Tako da i djeca čitaju e-knjigu. To je u postotku od otprilike 3% sveukupnog članstva knjižnica grada Zagreba, ali ako pogledamo općenito statistike i u svijetu korištenja e-knjige, odnosno kupovine i posudbe e-knjige naspram tiskane knjige, pokazalo se da u stvari se nije dogodilo ono što su svi predviđali, da će e-knjiga preuzeti tiskanu knjigu, nego da ta dva svijeta žive zajedno, paralelno, i dapače e-knjigu koristi tek 10% ukupnog, čini tek 10% ukupnog tržišta knjige, tiskane knjige, tako da evo, mislim da smo sa tih 3% članstva koje smo zahvatili za korištenje usluge posudbe e-knjige u stvari vrlo zadovoljni.
Hvala. Thank you. Mikkel, please.
Right, we started off also with our usual the usual library user as the digital user. They just, I mean, women in their 30s and 40s, and not a lot of men. I think men are the problem everywhere when it comes to reading. But then when we got our children and youth service, the eReolen Go I was talking about, where they can just log in and they can use a school login, that has actually meant that a third of our ebook loans are now on that dedicated service, and it's really putting the floor under the ebook market. Otherwise, it would basically collapse. So that was great. What I'm wondering and what I'm debating with library directors now is that when they get all these new audio these listeners, these loans, is that great? Is that a success in and of itself? Are we in the what business are we in? If we're in the reading business, then we need to use the audiobooks as a gateway drug to get them to read. If we're sort of in the cultural, literary business, then it's probably fine. But we shouldn't end with just the audio, the listeners. I think we should try and move them on to reading, because otherwise in 10 years, nobody's going to read anymore. And as Sandra said, we can just all go home and we don't have to have conferences anymore. So.
Okay, thank you. Marco wants to continue.
Yeah, I didn't mention the average user also, but in Slovenia it's female, 40 plus, highly educated, which reads a lot. And basically, when we are looking at the younger population, we did quite a lot of pilot project in schools, and who would have thought that the youngsters who are using their mobile devices instantly, if you just put them in their hands, they will use it without any manuals or something like this, but they don't like to read on those devices. Like Mikael mentioned before, Google and Amazon are now actually pushing into our homes devices, which make consumers it from the beginning of the life cycle. Actually, with Alexa, you can read a book or listen a book from the very beginning itself. So the subscription services, from my opinion, are something that are making libraries endangered species in the future. If the subscription services will be such aggressive in the future, they will actually take over the libraries, the library business, because they have the content. They have the content which is not shared to the other services. They're putting a lot of effort into the quality of that content, and one of the things is, I remember some half year ago with Mikael, we have discussing what that spikes are meaning in the statistics, and we said we really need to do some kind of analytics, because this is not just that people were home and they were reading, but it's something strange that's happening here. And one of the things that happened here is that subscription services really exploded. And it means that also people focused on some other things, and now they are paying like 5 to 10 euro every month. And they have forgot about that payment because they are actually auto-cycling all the time, and they have content available on them. Television, Netflix, Beats, Storytel, Amazon Prime, just name it, according to the content. And this is something that users are just getting used to, because they have it without just one click away. They don't even have to do the metadata search or something like that to get to the content. You just turn it on and there is 10 channels which are just popping out of all devices that you have. And this is something that bothers us mostly, because libraries really need to fight quite uneven fight here, and it's really a threat to a future.
Okay, very optimistic for the future. I'm joking, of course, but we should be aware of all these threats, all of these developments, and maybe trends which are happening in this media and, generally speaking, online sector. So this would be the wrap up of this panel session. I do hope that we had a fruitful discussion for our audience, and I can say that most of you were quite patient, although we can hear from the other side of this screen what's happening over there. Thank you to my panelists. Really, it was great to have you online and also here offline. I do hope that we're going to continue somehow this or similar discussion for the future. And you can, of course, look for the partners here in Serbia for any kind of projects, including Serbian Library Association, but also other libraries who are interested in such topics. So thank you once more, and all the best from Serbia. A za vas, drage kolege, hvala vam na strpljenju i nastavljamo sa radom posle ručka u 3 sata. Hvala vam.